as we move into the Mark II intake, I'm going to hope that E actually fits this, but I'm not holding out too much hope. So here we have the Mark II intake. Now, not exactly the most detailed piece of plastic. You know, it's got some seam marks on the side that need cleaning up. No big deal. So let's go ahead and knock that shit out. A sanding stick action. One nice little benefit of sanding all these pieces is that this plastic is really soft, so you can get through them pretty quickly. Now, since this needs to be flat, I can go ahead and hit it with the file, because files, unlike sanding sticks, have no give. Alright, there you have it. The intake that looks like a pair of truck nuts. Now we've got our mesh. And voila. Now comes the moment of truth. Does this fit? You know, this one actually maybe does. Sweet. Alright, so it's been glued in. It does sit a little bit proud, as you can see here, but nowhere near as bad as this piece of shit. You know, this one is not too bad. Voila. Now we're going to zoom out. Get this little guy installed. Just like so. Okay, so it was around this point in the build that I realized that this whole narrating while I build thing was a pretty shitty way to go in terms of both being articulate and also in terms of editing the videos on the back end. Because when you have 11 hours of footage and a lot of rambling, you need to keep things in, to keep words in, etc. So what I did instead was I shut up, you know, started listening to audiobooks and podcasts again, and just saved the voiceover stuff for the back end. So what you're going to hear from here on out is me sort of giving a running play-by-play of what's going on, as opposed to narrating it in the moment. Okay, so here we're moving on to the main radiator and applying some Tamiya Extra Thin in order to get the plastic together before the photo etch goes in. Now, I skipped the tedious photo etch application process, so we're going to go right into test fitting. And it sits a bit awkward in places, so we're going to scrape off some of the edges. And hey, look, that's better. Now, Tamiya Extra Thin around the edges. Let it really work in there. A few touch-ups up front. Looks pretty good. But let's go ahead and provide a little bit of extra pressure to really get it sealed in there. Now, the radiator door proved an awkward fit. It just didn't really want to fit into this little recess here, so time to shave a little bit of stuff away. And there we go, it fits nice. Now a little bit more Tamiya Extra Thin. This part was fun.
So a little bit of extra squeeze into that hole. Oh, shit. Oh, there. Oh, fuck. So, got it back in place. And a little bit more extra thin just to really weld that join right there. So now we move on to the rudder. And overall, the rudder fits like most rudders do. Running a bit of Tamiya extra thin along the edges here and up underneath. Then using pliers to put some pressure down and really get that join sealed up. Sure enough, it fits. Definitely some cleanup needed at the top of the tail, however. Now running Tamiya extra thin into the aft side. This is where there were some problems. If you see that little light housing at the back, it definitely provided some lifting issues with these two halves. So the pliers came in to do their little job to seal everything up nicely. But this is that soft plastic that doesn't want to hold, so hello locking tweezers. And those ended up doing a pretty nice job of holding things together. So there we go. So here we've got the prop spinner. Now the blades fit well enough that I felt okay joining the spinner up before putting the blades on. Fit here was decent. Honestly though, I really would have preferred that they'd done this in resin because you're missing out on some lovely detail. Now the spinner had some interesting fit issues into the cowl because it has this kind of mounting collar, and the cowl itself has, you know, some flash and some unevenness that needs to be cleaned up. So here I am hitting it with a sanding stick again. Oh, not too bad, right? But you can see that mounting collar there is too wide for the mounting hole, so it doesn't quite fit. It's got to be widened before it goes in fully. Minor thing, but a bit frustrating. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the propeller blades. Now I've skipped all the cleanup that had to go into these things with sanding, but fortunately they fit into the spinner quite well. So a little bit of finagling on this one, and then boom, it fits. So pull it back out. Grab the Tamiya extra thin. Little dollop. And there we go. Easy peasy. Now moving on to the next blade. These are probably the best fitting elements of the kit, if we're being honest. And there we go again. Now there's the propeller, and you can see on the back there that sort of mounting collar on the pin. And there we go. So one frustrating part of these resin gear bays was this flash covering up these little truss type structures here. No real easy way to get in there except with an X-Acto and a lot of swearing. So cut, 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 cut. Try not to break any of the other pieces, and use tweezers to yank out the extra excess piece. There we go. Done and done. Okay, so now it's time to install the landing gear struts. And if I'm being honest, these were a bit more frustrating than I had anticipated, mainly because I had a really hard time finding good references for the angle the landing gear is supposed to sit at. There was definitely some wobble in these gear struts, and that angle would have been really nice to know. Fly's instructions are obviously useless on this point, but you know, even some quick Google research proved frustrating. So here we go with some CA glue. Get these things set in there. So here you can see that wobble. I mean, they can sit probably in a good 15-20 degree arc. A little bit of accelerator just to lock things down. Now these support struts were a huge pain in the ass. They took some cleaning up around these U-joints that go into the back. And even then, this sort of, butt join here to the landing gear struts, not my favorite thing in the world. If I were building this for real, I would probably consider replacing those struts with some metal tubing and drilling out some holes and all that kind of business. And even after they're in, you can see they need some additional adjustment. On to the other side. So lay down to me extra thin first, put the U-joint down there, and line it up with the strut. And realign it. And before all is said and done, provide a little bit of extra glue to that U-joint and press it on down. And with that, the landing gear struts are installed. Sweet. Alright, here we've got the tail wheel, which is, the resin tail wheel and the plastic strut with one of those little plastic pieces that goes over top and links down. Now, this is easy enough to do when you're just building it without painting it. Building it and painting it would require either some care or painting the wheel afterwards. Overall, though, no major fuss here. I have to drill out the tail wheel's hole big enough to really fit these parts. Other than that, it's just a matter of patience and letting the solvent cement do its thing over time. So, there you have it. Again, it takes a while to work because of the soft plastic. And now it's time to move into the horizontal stabilizers. So clip off the excess sprue gates and chisel out some of the ejector pins that get in the way. Fun. And sand, sand, sand. There's a lot of sanding involved here to really get these so they mate nicely. And then once they do, it's a nice little bead of Tamiya Extra Thin to the rescue. You have to be careful with the pressure on these so you don't make the front lip open up. Hence this sort of nail push that you see going on here. And some more extra thin to the back. And there we go. One stab done. Now moving on to the control surfaces, same thing, clean up sand, Tamiya Extra Thin. Again, a nice little bead. These actually fit rather well and didn't take too much in the way of pressure to hold things together, just more time again for the soft plastic to fully cure. A little bit of pressure with tweezers on the outside edges to really aid that along. And voila, let's see how they fit. Hey, not too bad. Okay, now going into the install, shocker, the holes for the stabs are too small. So get the file in there and start boring it out a little bit. Always my favorite kind of work. Test fit, not quite, so let's bring in the X-Acto and do a little bit of shaving. Or maybe a little bit more shaving. And this time the stab fits. Sweet. Okay, so super glue to lock it in. Here we go. Hold briefly, not as long as we have to hold for the soft plastic to cure with liquid cement, but you know. Now once that's good, in with the Tamiya Extra Thin around the edges, minor adjustments to assure that alignment is there with the other stab, and now moving on to the tail wheel. So the hole here was too small. Again, get to bore it out with the X-Acto and do a little bit of trimming around the edges, and then the wheel fits. So once it's in place, again, Tamiya Extra Thin, our good friend, comes along to help lock it down. So the next part of this finish out odyssey is these leading edge lights. Now, Fly didn't provide the lenses as clear parts, but instead as this sort of plastic hemisphere thing, and some little PE pieces to go on the front that are extremely fiddly to install. But a little bit of, acrylic glue and patience with tweezers gets them aligned-ish. There we go. Now fitting the covers for the landing lights. They're too wide. Okay, so let's do some sanding and try again. Not too bad, right? Now I could have put a little bit more effort into making these things really fit, but if we're being honest at this point, I was very deep into the fuck it zone. So, close enough. To me, extra thin to seal these things around the edges. I think what's not seen here is a little bit of finger pressure to really dig these into their mounts. And there you go. Next, it's the wingtip lights and their covers. So a little bit of white glue. These interesting sort of clear bits that represent the actual bulbs. There goes that one. And this tail light. Little bit of final adjustment. One of the steps to save for last is this photo etch that Fly has for the tail. Now this piece here that you see going in is a sort of bendy and twisty piece that requires some really careful install and a lot of holding of the breath, which is frustrating because it's really hard to swear when you can't breathe. So this next piece is going in. Again, micro control necessary. Helps to just kind of get it on there and then make some slight tweaks. You definitely want to hold this off until as long as possible because these are very easy to break off. Little nudge, there we go. Okay. Okay, so one of the last parts of the Hurricane build is installing the windscreen. Now, you see that little flat piece at the bottom of the front pane. A frustrating thing here is that that does not match the curve of the fuselage. And even with Tamiya Extra Thin here to help lock this down, the fit to the fuselage is just not all that great. If this were something where I were building this for real, I would definitely be spending a lot more time and a lot more blood, sweat, and tears making sure that that shape aligned a bit better. But, at the end of a build review, this isn't unacceptable. So, at this point, my feeling is enough pressure will make it fit. And as you can see, it kind of does. I still think that front curve is awful. And here is the main canopy. More to me extra thin. Again, at the fuck it stage, throw solvent at it till it fits. And fuck. There we go.